This is the IDP After Show.
Welcome to the IDP After Show with me, Jase Abbey. I have been really looking forward to this one all week. I'm bringing you another IDP preview episode where every week I am joined by the best IDP analysts to help me break down the defensive players we think have some of the best and worst weekly matchups. And joining me to examine what week 5 has to offer is the one, the only Scott Bogman. Scott, it's amazing having you on. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again. Always happy to be part of these IDP shows with you guys. And this is going to be a lot of fun, man. I don't get my normal outlet of talking IDP anymore. So I'm happy to be on and happy to talk IDP with you.
Let's do it. Week 5 already. Like bi-week fun starts here, but there's a couple of there's actually one key storyline that I want to talk about, and I'm going to be careful. As we were talking off air, I jinxed the Steelers last week by saying that their defense has been amazing, and then we saw what happened. But when I say I'm going to be careful, I'm not. The Broncos defense, are they legit, do you think, or have they just done pretty well so far against mediocre offenses? Because their offense isn't scoring any points, is it, Scott? So their defense is doing what it has to do to get them some wins here, right?
I thought maybe we're like, okay, well, Denver has faced some bad offenses and everything, but then the Bucs were pretty on fire when they faced the Bucs in Tampa and just smoked them, held them to 7 points, made Baker look like a fool. I thought they looked great, and that was when I was kind of like, okay, I think maybe we have something here. So I took them in the under in that game against the Jets this week, and obviously that played out well. So I think we might be looking at something for real. We saw the Denver defense last year, though, go from the team that gave up 70 points to turning into a pretty good unit for the rest of the year. It was like they needed that embarrassment to improve.
It was the Dolphins game. It was,
yeah.
Wasn't it?
It was. That was when the Dolphins had Tua and were peak everything, scoring on every play, it felt like. So 10 touchdowns. It's nuts. So, but yeah, I think this Denver defense is stepping up and is for real. They have good players at every single level. Singleton getting hurt obviously was a big blow to the defense, but good Lord, can you believe that guy tore his knee in the first quarter and then played the rest of the game? What an animal. That guy is awesome. So, but I mean, I think what we're seeing here is for real.
Yeah, and like you said, again, it done without a few guys, Singleton, Browning as well. And then they've got a few guys there at the edge position who can kind of come in and get the job done. But yeah, I'm enjoying seeing it. But I'm hoping that I don't go 2 for 2. And like I said, jinx them for next week. We'll see. We'll revisit this conversation and see how we get on. But for those that are unfamiliar with the format, have not seen the previous weeks that we've done this show, Scott and I are going to talk about 4 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen, and 4 defensive backs who we think are going to be either a big hit or a huge miss in week 5. And we'll also talk about the player who our audience voted for in our weekly poll. And that player this week was DeMarvion Overshown. It was a bit predictable. And that's kind of why I put it in there. I wanted to talk about him. You guys have given us the opportunity. Thank you very much. Right, Scott, which linebacker do you think has a great shot to produce big in week 5?
I'm going to go with Bengals linebackers. I mean, Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. And right now, they're both top 14 linebackers in terms of points per game. I believe Pratt is 4th right now, even though Logan Wilson is the guy playing 100% of the snaps. I think Pratt's still around 90%. But they're going up against the Ravens this week. And, the Ravens started out bad, 0-2. The horrible comeback win for the Raiders in Baltimore was just an embarrassment. And so I think we've seen the Ravens do exactly what we expected them to do in the offseason, and it's run Derrick Henry a million times, right? Like, let's hand the ball to the freak of nature and let him run 1,000 times. And I think that is probably going to be the strategy here, since they're 0-2 without that and 2-0 with it. I think that's going to continue to be the strategy, even though I think their defense can be beat in a couple different ways. But I'm also a Steelers fan and a Cincy hater. So I just think that they're going to keep running the ball, which is going to increase tackle totals for Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Also, we've seen them have a large lead in time of possession, which means that defense is out on the field a bunch. These are guys that are playing at a 90% clip. Logan Wilson's at a 100% clip, I think, for the year. So, yeah, I think these guys are going to be involved. I think they're going to get a bunch of tackles. And I know that Wilson was a big draw earlier, before the season started. So he's on a lot of rosters. Pratt is still, I don't know what these numbers that I have on Fantasy Pros are actually, if they're like rating every team. And so he's only on 14% of every team, or if that's all IDP teams. But Pratt needs to be rostered in every spot right now. And I don't think he is.
No, I think you're probably right. He's kind of that just below 100%, that full time every down guy, isn't he? And people love a bit of Logan Wilson. He gets all that kudos, and then it took, I think was it last year, the start of last year, or maybe even the year before, when Pratt really caught up in terms of almost caught up, I should say, in terms of that snap share, and that's been great ever since. The one criticism I had of these guys, and this is more of a sort of season long thing rather than a looking ahead to week 5 thing, was always the tackle efficiency with them both, and that's hasn't been quite there. Certainly wasn't there last year, but this year it's looked really good. So yeah, I'm all aboard, especially in this matchup. You explained that well. They're gonna be busy, aren't they? They're gonna get the ball's gonna be run down their throat.
Yeah, and I thought it really, the thing here, I think BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins also being out for this game just does not help, right? And I don't know if they're both going to be out. They both missed last week. They're questionable. Those hamstring injuries are tricky. So even if they are playing, it's doubtful that they're playing at 100%. So you have the backups in there. You have Chris Jenkins and Tufele and all those guys in the middle kind of doing a rotation, and they're secondary players. And so those guys get shoved out of the way. So here comes Wilson and Pratt in to try to scoop up these tackles. And you have to be good at tackling if those guys are going to be gone. So, which is also something I equate missed tackles, not 1-for-1, but pretty close to drops with wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
Like when it sucks, you never want it. You don't want to miss tackle. You don't want to drop catch. It's frustrating to see these things happen. But unless it's impacting their snap percentage and them being on the field or not on the field, guys are going to miss tackles. So it's a valid criticism, absolutely. But in terms of like being on the field, if they're not taking them off for the missed tackles, I'll suffer through the missed tackles.
Yeah, I get you totally. Tell me what you think about my nomination then. So I've gone with Trevin Wallace, and this is low hanging fruit, I admit, right? Shaq Thompson's torn his Achilles. I hope he makes a full recovery. Really sorry to see that for him. Wallace was the next man up. I think he played every down in the fourth quarter. I heard John Mackey talking about that the other day. There is a danger, I think, that Ejiro Evero won't hand Wallace the kind of snap share that Thompson had. But this week, Scott, you've got Josie Jewell banged up as well with I think it's a hamstring and a groin injury. So the Panthers' opponent also this week is the Bears. We know they've been in kind of like an above average matchup for opposition linebackers in terms of tackle volume. Not necessarily big plays, but tackle volume, which is what I kind of look for. So yeah, I think Wallace, I think he's got a great opportunity to play a big role this week. I think he's got a really good chance to be productive. What say you? Have I been a bit hasty to anoint him as the guy? Do you want to see how it plays out over the next game or two before you decide?
But I would not start him this week. I would want to see what it looks like with this high snap percentage and see, is he getting washed out of plays? Is he missing tackles? Do they yank him off the field because he's not doing his job? I just want to see how it works before I start him. But in terms of opportunity, you're 100% correct. I mean, this is absolutely right. You just lost your veteran in the middle in Shaq Thompson. Whether he's good or not, or whether he's good or not anymore is debatable. That's fine, especially coming off that injury. But now he's out, and Wallace is the guy. So it's funny with these young guys that are super athletic like Wallace. So it's super exciting to see him because being a Steelers fan, I kind of relate most things to what I've seen the Steelers do, right? So you either have Ryan Shazier, who is super athletic, didn't really know what he was doing a lot his first season, worked into it, and was on his way to becoming a defensive MVP before he got hurt. I mean, that year he was crazy. Mm-hmm. And then Devin Bush, who's super athletic, a little undersized, but super unbelievably athletic, couldn't figure it out at all.
Yeah.
Missed tackles, missed assignments, not good in coverage, just not a good linebacker, right? Should have played slot corner or moved positions or something. I don't know. He's just not a good player.
Yeah.
So you have one of those too, and we just don't know what this is going to look like at this level. Is he going to be unlocked and be one of these better linebackers that has the opportunity? Because Carolina's been performing great the last 2 weeks with Andy Dalton. I don't know about you, Jase, but I don't anticipate that continuing the whole season. I still think it's a pretty bad team. So they're going to be on defense a lot. There's going to be a lot of leads being salted away in the third, fourth quarter, late in games against Carolina this season, which means there's going to be so many opportunities for Wallace. So he's absolutely a great ad right now just to see what we have and how long he's going to be there and how good he actually is, especially when you can get him cheap now before he's played at all. But before I put him in my lineup, I do want to see him play a game, a full set of snaps, and see what his production is like.
That sounds fair. I'll concede on that one. And I'm not overly proud. I get it. I was thinking about the bye weeks, to be honest with you, and thinking these guys, there's people out there. There's a load of injuries last week. There's a load of injuries in week 2. Last week for linebackers was horrible. Maybe there's some people out there who, just are really struggling to go out and find a guy who has a shot to play every down. But yeah, I do totally get your point as well. It's if you can afford to not start him and you have other guys that you are very confident are going to continue to play every down, then why would you take the risk? It's not like it's an amazing matchup. It's just, if you're struggling, you could do a lot worse, I think.
Let me ask you this. Who is a guy that is probably on more rosters right now that you would drop for Trevin Wallace?
So some of the other guys, I don't want to give it away because there's other guys who we're going to talk about in a bit who I think might end up playing a similar snap share this week. But it's difficult, like Britt, for example, right? So he's been a disappointment to start the season. Obviously, we saw what happened to Dennis. Britt started playing a lot more. There's a risk involved there. But if you're like looking at guys like that, then maybe that's a decision to be made. But yeah, the bye weeks, I don't know which teams are on bye. So there's the Chargers. You're not really losing. You're losing Henley, I guess, as a linebacker.
Titans, Eagles.
Yeah. So you're not that desperate, I don't think, this week. But
Lions. Yeah.
If you started, I've got one league, for example, Scott, right? And I started that league with, I think, like one linebacker who I knew could become, and it was Spillane, that would become like a reliable guy that I could plug and play every week. And I did this on purpose, and I found myself really short at the linebacker spot, which I know is not like wise to do. But then the last 2 seasons, every season I've come along and found someone on waivers like a Trevin Wallace who just
Dorian Williams playing
does
great
the job for me. Yeah, that's it, right? And even like Dodson, at one point with the plethora of injuries they have at the linebacker position in the Bills. It just seems to be you can come along and find some of these guys. But I'm going off on a tangent. I'm just trying to justify my Wallace selection.
No, I think I think adding him is very smart, and that's why I asked you the question of like who would you drop. So it's like who is borderline right here, where hey, look, we're not starting this guy. Probably he's probably a bench linebacker or a flex IDP, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who would you be willing? It's the same as the offensive side.
Maybe like a Trenton Simpson, right? Because he's got to the point now where he's not playing anywhere near the size of the role that we wanted him to.
Right.
Young, talented guy.
And with Derrick Henry, they're just not on the field enough. They're 35 minutes of possession or whatever it is. So that's why Roquan is like 19th. So
yeah. Redraft, maybe like an Ivan Pace as well. I'm thinking about a lot of young guys in the similar thing. We want them to be really good, but their teams seem to like playing other guys ahead of them a lot. Again, redraft, not in Dynasty. So tell me, this is going to ruffle some feathers, and I like this. I like the fact that you've been bold here. So you've got a linebacker that you dislike here that you want to talk about. Go for it.
Yeah, look, I just mentioned him. It's Roquan, and it's not starting Roquan is never a bad decision. It's always the right decision. So don't bench him. But I'm just thinking in terms of this week, which matchups that I don't like. And I just said it, there's a reason he's 19th in points per game. He's 15th in tackles. He's more of a linebacker 2 right now. And if I'm right about Cincinnati and how Baltimore is going to play this game, then the Baltimore defense is not going to be on the field as much as we expect, right? Which means fewer opportunities. That's not everything. I get caught up a little bit in time of possession. So I'll throw that out and admit that as a somewhat of a blind area for me on occasion. But I just really don't like what I've seen from this Cincy defense. They got torched by Jaden Daniels, right? They've been run all over, I feel like, this season as well. So, Cincy is bottom 10 in rushing yards allowed. BJ Hill and Rankins both miss those games. So I just think that's going to allow Baltimore to carry that ball a bunch. And this is the frustration with Mark Andrews. They're not throwing the ball, right? Zay Flowers, I believe, everyone's like 9 routes for Mark Andrews. Zay Flowers ran 16. Yeah. So it's not like these guys are getting a lot of routes in. So they're running the ball, and I think they're going to continue to do that. I think they're going to do it successfully against Cincinnati. And I think it's going to keep Roquan off the field. So I just think in terms, you're always starting Roquan. You're never taking him off the field. I'm not going to tell you to do that, because if something happens and he's a guy that can get 20 tackles and not blink an eye. So he's always on the field. But this week, he's just not my favorite matchup.
Yeah, you completely disarmed me and my entire argument when you started by you're never going to drop Roquan. No. So that was what I was going to lead with. But yeah, you said everything there is to say.
Starting him, I'm just so let's say you have let's go with Spillane, as you mentioned before, EJ Speed, Troy Anderson, and Roquan. And you have 2 linebackers to start and a flex.
I've been burnt too much trying to get cute sometimes by dropping my absolute studs. Anderson wouldn't be in the picture for me, I guess.
Yep.
I'd be worried about the injury, I guess. And maybe he's just not on the same.
Yeah,
he's not nearly as reliable as some of those other games. Spillane's on fire right now.
Right. You can't
hard not to keep him involved.
You can't bench Spillane. You can't bench EJ Speed right now.
No.
So it's like, okay, if I'm debating between Roquan and Roquan and Levante David, Dotson, Roquan and Dotson, right? Like something like that. Like that's the situation. And listen, I'm still starting Roquan. I think just what you said, I'm not getting cute, right? Yeah. I'm not going to do it. But maybe Roquan goes off. Maybe you can trade him for a piece that you need on offense if you are stacked at linebacker. That's just my thought process of the way the Ravens games have been shaping, the way his season has been shaping as well. He's looking more like an LB2 than an LB1 right now.
Yep.
And that can flip, that can flip at any point. He's still one of the best linebackers in the league, no doubt.
Yeah, maybe we are getting to that point now where, I feel like I've been saying the phrase small sample size a lot for the last month, but we are now week 5. It's not as small as it was. Stating the obvious,
a third of the way through the season for most people.
There's some trends developing, and maybe now we do need to start kind of believing in some of what we're seeing. But I guess whether it was like absolute like gold studs like the Roquans, I'd struggle. But yeah, like you say, if you got the guys that you mentioned, the Speeds, the Spillane, you start 2. It's almost like you could start any 2 of those 3 in that situation, and you wouldn't have to lose any sleep at night, right? Because whatever you've done, it's you're probably not going to get it right. But even if you don't, there shouldn't be a huge difference.
If you have all those options, you're doing everything right, and you should be making moves. You should be trading somebody because you don't want that good player to sit on your bench. You want to replace them for a spot you're weak at. If it's offensively or defensively, it doesn't really matter. Just try to make a move for sure.
Yeah. So let me tell you about my nomination. This one isn't nearly as ballsy as yours, but I'm going to talk about Tremaine Edmunds. I'm going to sit Tremaine Edmunds this week, and really, and I will caveat that by saying this only if I have other full-time guys on my roster to play ahead of him. If you're talking about like other guys that are going to be maybe in that sort of 80 to 90% range, then I probably just still go with Edmunds, I guess. But I've never been crazy about Edmunds, Scott, as an NFL player. I really wanted him to be good. I think most people did, right? And that's kind of been the same case with him as an IDP asset as well. He's never, for me, really excelled. He's kind of flashed at times, and I've got a little bit excited about who he is as a player, but it's never really put it all together over a consistent period for me. So yeah, I mean, crucially for fantasy purposes, he's never really been an elite tackle producer. Currently sat at 9.5% tackle efficiency on the year, which is not what we want from our fantasy linebackers. So I suspect that might continue this week. The Bears face the Texans. The Texans have so far been a below average matchup for tackle production from opposition linebackers. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I understand that. I always see Tremaine Edmunds to me is a guy that is just like a floor player, right? He's, and I have him in a bunch of spots because I'll wait on IDP sometimes, because in a lot of the leagues that I'm in, it's not everyone is an IDP person. So I feel I get a little cocky. I feel like I can wait on taking some IDP guys. So when they first start going, I'm like, I know who to get later. So I'm not going to do it now. I wait too long, and then I get my floor player, Tremaine Edmunds. So I have him in a bunch of teams. I think I have him in the Football Diehards League. I think maybe I have him in Deathmatch. I can't remember. Gary Davenport's enormous IDP league. So I have him in a couple spots. But I think you're right. This is it's tough for both these guys to succeed too, him and Edwards, right? So who do you say?
There's only so many tackles, right?
Right. Chicago's playing Carolina too. So it's like, if that offense is on the field a bunch, a lot, like we said before, I think that there's less opportunities for him as well. So I don't mind this one. I think we're trying to pick bigger names. I kind of felt bad for taking Germaine, Pratt, and Logan Wilson. I'm like, am I giving people good enough information here? Are these guys too good to have in this spot? But because you had picked Trevin Wallace, so I was like, maybe I should be getting more like borderline free agency guys here. But this is another one like Roquan, where it's like, but unlike Roquan, Edmunds is a guy you can sit at any point. Like, I don't mind that either. So we'll see. I like him for the floor, but he has to make a pick, or he has to get a sack. He has to make a splash play to really hold a ton of value. And those obviously are not going to come every single week.
Yeah. He did make a bunch of, was it last year? He had like 8, 9, 10 pass break. I forget when it was. It might be last year, it might be the year before, but maybe it could happen. Maybe it could happen. Like you say, we're picking big names because we don't want to just pick those low sort of hanging fruit like I did with Trevin Wallace earlier on. So let's move on to the defensive line then, Scott. So which defensive lineman do you like in week 5?
I'm gonna go with Jonathan Greenard, Minnesota playing the New York Jets in London here. And I know Greenard has already aggravated us once this season. Was it the week 1 or week 2? He had the donut. So super aggravating. But this team blitzes more than anyone. You're going to see Aaron Rodgers, I think, want to throw the ball a lot, especially overseas. You get Garrett Wilson involved, and Fashanu is starting, the rookie. And he is a pass blocking specialist, but he's a rookie in the NFL in a game where everyone has to travel overseas. It's a weird environment for everyone. And now you get to go and face Brian Flores' super complicated blitzing defense in your second start of your career. So good luck, son. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know how that's going to work for him. So I think there could be multiple sacks from the Vikings. I think Greenard is the guy. This offense on the other side of the ball, this offense for Minnesota has been peaking and looking really, making Sam Darnold look great. And if there is a team that he wants to beat more than the Jets, I don't know who it could be. So I expect the Vikings to come out and put up points, which is going to put pressure on the Jets to score points, which they didn't do last week. And you see the frustration between Aaron Rodgers and LaFleur already. So let's, or Saleh, excuse me. But let's see how this works, because I don't really like this situation for the Jets. I think the Vikings are on fire. I think the Jets are frustrated. Now, Jerry Glanville taught us a long time ago, the NFL stands for not for long. So these things could flip. This is parity. That's why it's the NFL any given Sunday, right? But I think if things go based on how it has been going, it's going to be Minnesota by a decent amount. And in the third and fourth quarter, you're going to see a lot of passing from Aaron Rodgers, which means opportunities for sacks from this defensive line.
Yeah, what I really like about this one is that, Fashanu has really struggled so far in very limited playing time. And like you say, there's a lot. I like it when you've gone into the depth to think about the fact that he'll be unsettled, like move again, like you said, like coming over to London. It's got to be big, right? It's big him just to play in his third game in the NFL, let alone to come over here and do it. And Greenard's a good pass rusher. In fact, they've got 3, maybe 4 good pass rushers there now.
Pat Jones,
yeah.
What a step up that guy has had this year. It's been incredible.
Yeah. So yes, I do like this one. I think any one of those guys could go off really for the Vikings, but Greenard's in a great spot. So yeah, no disagreement from me. But Fashanu really looked like he really struggled against the Broncos, I thought.
Yeah, and maybe maybe we'll get a little bit more, but I heard people talking about the Penn State offense this year, saying that they're glad Fashanu's gone because they can run the ball, because they couldn't run to his side last year, which is insane to think. This guy's starting in the NFL, and you can't run to his side. Like, NFL teams are going to know that. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll see as much Breece Hall either in this game, or at least not out of, getting carries. Probably a lot of dump off passes towards Breece Hall. Like, you can never count out Breece Hall. I know he had the bad week this week against, what we expect to be a good Broncos D moving forward, unless we have cursed it here, like you said. But it's just this guy is a hindrance to this offense right now. He should be riding the pine. He should be learning, but injuries happen and he's got to step up. Yep.
So my guy, for me, I think, as you mentioned briefly, Dorance Armstrong, I think he's in a really good spot to have a big week here. And it's not, we like to chase the form. A lot of people do that, and that's not always the right thing to do. It's not just because of the 2 sacks last week, and I think he had the 1 the week before. That's nice, though, to see that kind of form. His kind of nomination for me is primarily because the Commanders are playing the Browns this week, and as you and I were talking about before we hit record tonight, Scott, that Browns offense has really struggled. That offensive line, Watson's holding onto the ball too long. Still, they've got injuries. They've been decimated. They've allowed like 79 pressures, the most in the NFL, 19 sacks, the most in the NFL. Yes, Watson's also had the most dropbacks of any QB, but why? is the question we were asking each other earlier on. Like, why are they still attempting this? And people will say it's because they're behind and they have to pass to catch up and everything. But it's clearly not working. If you can't protect Watson, then you need to find a different way to make that work. So gone off on a tangent, but yes, I think we'll see plenty of dropbacks for Watson again this week. The way the Commanders have been playing, right? They're going to be. You'd like to think, again, try not to jinx these teams, but you have to think they're probably going to be playing with a lead. So I really like Armstrong this week to continue his fine form. And can I just add, it's really nice to see a guy who feels like he was playing like third, fourth fiddle for the Cowboys. This was for a long time. Just come over to a new team and get a shot and get an opportunity. For him to seize it with both hands, it's kind of nice, isn't it?
It really is great, and to see a guy become head coach, his defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, and bring him over and say, you deserve this opportunity. And, you look at this pass rush from Washington going into the season, you're like, I still don't know if it's here. Like, is Luvu going to be the guy, but Dorance Armstrong has stepped up. And like you said about Watson, just looking at it, he's holding the ball third longest. The 2 guys that are holding the ball longer than him, Brock Purdy, because he can. His offensive line is very good. He can sit back there and do it. And then Jalen Hurts, because he's going to be able to avoid a rush once it gets to him. So he's also, the problems with his wide receivers so far this year being banged up. So, holding the ball, trying to look for a deeper play, all that kind of stuff. Purdy can do it because of his own line. Hurts can do it because of his athleticism. Watson used to be able to do it because of his athleticism. Not anymore. I think the only guy with more scrambles right now is Jane Daniels, who is a rookie. So Deshaun Watson very much playing like a rookie, holding the ball. We saw that against who was the Raiders that got him 8 times. So, I mean, just bad efforts from mainly Watson. Like I'll blame the O-line too. They've had injuries in Cleveland. It hasn't been pretty, but get that ball out of your hands. What are you doing? And like you said, just what the hell are they doing? Passing the ball so much. Run the ball with these. Didn't you go and get all these giant running backs, right? You went and got Foreman, who's just a hammer. Ford is a very good back as well. You giving these guys 9-10 carries a game. What are you doing? So
yeah,
it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think you're right. Dorance Armstrong going to be in the backfield a lot visiting Deshaun Watson this week.
Yes, sir. Okay. Dislikes. Then who do you want to nominate here? Defensive lineman who you don't like this week?
Yeah, let's go with Will McDonald. I'm going to go on the opposite side of that game as well in your neck of the woods. And my man has 5 sacks this year. He is very good at getting to the quarterback, but he's barely above 50% snaps in the rotation. He doesn't get tackles either. The guards and centers in Minnesota, Brandel, Ingram, and Bradbury, have given up more sacks, 3 to Darisaw and Brian O'Neill's 2 total on the outside. Will McDonald is really not a guy that's going to get a lot of pressure inside. He's more of a, go around the tackle and use that unbelievable speed that this guy has. So
yeah.
I just don't know how he's going to get to Sam Darnold in this game. So we know he's also not going to have tackles. So he is a boomer bust player. And I think this week he is a bust.
Yeah, it pains me to say. I've been enjoying him, or his form, should I say. He's been a guy that I did pick up in one league, very deep league, and I was quite happy to play him in the second big game he had in a row. But then obviously last week was a little quieter, and his snap share isn't increasing. That doesn't concern me too much, to be honest with you. I think that he's played well enough to earn.
He comes in when he's needed
going forward. Yeah, but what you said there about the tackle floor is absolutely right. It reminds me of like a Yannick Ngakoue or a Trey Hendrickson. There's someone else I'm forgetting. These guys that come in and if they don't get a sack, they're getting 0 points or 0.
One trick pony
points. Yeah,
one trick pony.
That's okay. That's okay with people like Hendrickson, who gets you like 15 to 20 sacks a season.
Right. I always prefer Sam Hubbard.
Yeah.
I always prefer Sam Hubbard because I know he's, gonna this dude's probably at least gonna get me 2 or 3 tackles. So if we can get to the quarterback too, great. But it is Hendrick. There are definitely exceptions to the rule, but because TJ Watt doesn't get a ton of tackles most weeks, but you get to the quarterback at least once a week most of the times when you're not being held.
Yeah,
Josh, by your Colts offensive lineman. So, but it's not going to be a crybaby.
No, I love that. All the shade you want, throw it at Josh. It's all good. It's all good. So look, I'm going to fade George Karlaftis this week, and I started writing about how I don't think he's as good as other people think he is, but that's me going off on a weird point that doesn't really get us anywhere, to be honest.
The Charger fan, speaking of hate and shade, the Charger fan doesn't like the Chiefs player. How weird.
Well, I like him. I just don't think he's as good as some other people do. But I will say, if it like balances it out a little bit, Chris Jones is unreal, and it is so frustrating to watch. But as a fan of defense, I always prioritize, like, if I'm going to see like an amazing defensive performance, even if it's against my team, I don't really mind that much. But yeah, Karlaftis this week for me. I'm not going to talk about how I think he's slightly overrated and how he's more of a volume guy, but I think he's been unlucky, actually. I'll say something nice, to have like 1 sack from 15 pressures. That's like Josh Sweat, Yaya Diaby kind of territory, where he's producing good pressure volume and pressure rates, but he's just not getting home. And I think that sack rate will improve. Especially while he's getting the kind of snap volume that he's been getting. It's been like 80, 90 plus, which is great. It makes me think of like the Max Crosby, Byron Young last year type utilization, which is wonderful. You don't have to be great then. You just have to be on the field, right? So, but yeah, it's really about the matchup, Scott. So first glance, it looks pretty good because he's going to be playing opposite Trevor Penning, who is arguably the weakest player on that Saints offensive line, right? But Derek Carr has been sacked like 4 times. He's just not taking sacks this season. Did go back last year because I didn't remember him being like this super like pocket presence, amazing guy who can just see pressure coming from every. It wasn't really the case. What's happening this year, I don't really know. As I say, Trevor Penning's not that great. In fact, he's pretty poor. He's going to be playing opposite Karlaftis. It looks like a good matchup on paper, but Carr's just not getting sacked right now. That Saints offense has been on fire in most games. Just not getting too excited about Karlaftis this week. Might be a bit cruel.
No, I don't think so. The Saints haven't in their first 2 weeks. I know they just didn't pass the ball a ton. So like they had the big hitters, right? You had the Rashid Shaheed big hitters. You had those games where it was, it was just everything was clicking, and you could see this really working for the Saints offense. And just I'm pulling up right now his pass attempts. It went from 23 to 16, then 25 when they lost to Philly, and then the loss to Atlanta where they had the ball the whole game. 36 pass attempts, but still only 239 yards. The most yards he's had is 243. This offense has changed to him getting the ball out super quick. He's getting the ball out second fastest in the NFL behind Aaron Rodgers, which is another offense that has not been clicking. That offense just hasn't been clicking at all, but he's 2.57 seconds. That is the second fastest in the NFL, which means that there's not a lot of opportunity. When you have one Mississippi to get to the quarterback, it's not enough time. So, also, this offense has done a little bit more play action as well, which has, it's just looked different. And I don't think teams are used to it. Maybe this is the week that everything changes, but I'm with you. I don't think this is the week that everything changes. And I think Casey's going to have this ball a lot. So I think Karlaftis is a little more boomer bust than we would like him to be. I think that's the non-hater way to describe him, Jase, is just a little more boomer bust than we like. But yeah, I think this week could definitely bust.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I think he's a good player. 15 sacks last year, right? And his pressure rate, I looked it up, was a lot better than I remembered it being. So that's kind of like also why I deleted, and now I'm still actually talking about how I think he's slightly better. I think people think he's slightly better than I do, but we're talking like small margins.
Yeah.
So where are we down to now? Let's talk about some defensive backs. Who are you hyping this week, Scott?
I love Jaquan Brisker, man. I love that guy. I love watching him play. One of my favorite defensive backs. And Andy Dalton for the Panthers has had 77 pass attempts in his 2 starts. And Chicago should be able to pass against Carolina. Carolina right now, 25th in coverage grade on PFF, 31st in pass rush grade. Just not a very good defense at all. Obviously, they lost a big piece in Shaq Thompson. You said Josie Jewell's banged up as well. So it's just like everything is going to be open for Chicago, which should mean that we're going to see Carolina play comeback and, be passing late in this game, which leads towards big plays for Jaquan Brisker to possibly make. Andy Dalton could put the ball up for grabs, and Brisker has a high floor as well of 6 tackles plus assists in every single game this season. So we got the tackle floor. We have big play opportunity potential as well. And just one of my favorite guys to watch play as well. I mean, I love watching Christian Wilkins play. I wanted to get him in here too. One of my favorite defensive players, but just didn't fit the cards this week. So I will go with Brisker, one of my absolute favorites to watch.
Nice. I've also gone with a big name too. I've gone with Kyle Hamilton, and I feel like it's allowed at the DB spot. There's very little players that repeat as the best at their position, I think. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton. I think he's missing a few more tackles than usual so far. Again, we're like 5 games in. He's yet to produce any big plays. That doesn't scare me in the slightest, Scott. In fact, when I look at a guy like Kyle Hamilton, I see that he's producing the kind of tackle volume that he is. Yes, week 1 was a bit of a dud, but he's got like 24 in the last 3. He's really heating up a little bit. And I know those big plays are going to come. And at that point there, it's going to take him from being like a really good floor play to being like a really high ceiling guy as well. So I don't get too excited about DBs in general, but I do love watching Kyle Hamilton play. And Yeah, I think he's got a nice matchup against the Bengals this week. They I think they're top 5 in terms of tackles allowed to opposition safeties, and really liking jumping about a bit here, but really liking Hamilton's usage as well this year. A lot of snaps in the box, a lot of snaps at the slot corner as well. So yeah, I'm all aboard.
He is like Honey Badger, but 6'4" instead of 5'11", right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how I view Kyle Hamilton. You can put him everywhere. He could play linebacker. The dude could play defensive end if you wanted him to. He could play anywhere on the field. He's everywhere on the field. And do you know how annoying it is being a Steelers fan and watching the Ravens just sit at their spot, don't do any trades, and take the best player on the board? And the year they took Hamilton, they also took Tyler Linderbaum, and those are the 2 guys I wanted Pittsburgh to take. I was super annoyed with it. But yeah, I mean, this guy is a stud. Terrible to see him having such success on the Ravens. I don't like it, but you know, it's obvious how good he is, and I roster him in a bunch of spots as well, just because the upside is enormous. This is a guy that is going to end up being the number 1 IDP safety, I think, within, you know, not long. Probably this year. It could definitely happen, especially if Derwin James keeps getting suspended for cheap shots. So, you know, sorry, forgot you're a Chargers fan, but
no, I can take it.
yeah. But yeah, this is a great pick. We both win kind of cheap and easy, but I mean, defensive backs are cheap and easy. That's why it's, you wait to take them. You're rarely taking the high ones. So maybe it's here because we're taking the high ones here because we don't have them on our teams.
Yeah, that's it. And also, you know, I think there's people out there that will be looking at like the Xavier McKinney's, the Matthews, the guys who who's the Lions safety as well. The guys who've got loads of picks this year. The guys are kind of massive
Kirby
big players
Joseph.
Right now. Yeah, Kirby Joseph, right, and they're gravitating towards those guys, and I understand it. But don't be scared by those guys that have yet to produce any big plays. Sometimes they come in bunches at the defense, especially at the defensive back position. And I know they're going to come there for Carl. I mean, blitz is a hell of a lot. I don't remember where he ranks, but he's like top 5 in terms of blitz and safeties. And but it's not so high that it's going to affect his tackle efficiency either, which is nice to see as well. So
they do it in the right spots.
It'll get sacks.
Annoying. Yeah. The Ravens do it in the right spots. The safety blitz.
Yeah. So which DBs should we be avoiding then, Scott?
Man, I hate this, number one, because there's so many there's so many defensive backs that play and put up good points. It's hard to pinpoint the one that isn't going to do anything here, but I went with Rayshawn Jenkins, and this could look like a nice opportunity to step up if Love misses time. He left Monday Night Football with a thigh injury, but the Seahawks are the biggest favorite this week. They're -6 against the Giants, and I expect them to have the ball a lot. And yes, Drew Lock can throw picks, and he does throw the ball deep, so there is opportunity for Jenkins to make a play on the ball, but it's not really what he does. You know, he has 5 interceptions his last 54 games, 10 total in 83 career starts. So I don't know. Rayshawn Jenkins kind of always lost as well, I feel like, on the field. The opposite of what I said about Jaquan Brisker and Kyle Hamilton here. It's just one of my least favorite players to watch play because I feel like he gets torched. You know, Jacksonville, he just gave up so many big plays in Jacksonville. A lot of starting experience. Drew Lock is a bad quarterback, so I think with Love being down, people can look at this as maybe an opportunity for Jenkins, but I just don't like him. Yeah,
I don't dislike him. I think he's a player that I'll flip flop on sometimes. So sometimes I'll look at him and I think, oh, he's a box safety. That's brilliant. He's getting good tackle volume. He's pretty reliable. He's always there in drafts. No one seems to like to draft Rayshawn Jenkins. So I'm like, yeah, I'll pick him up and he'll serve a role for me. And then other times I look at him and I think, and sometimes you have to make this distinction, don't you, between NFL player and fantasy player.
Yes.
I look at him and I think you like you said, sometimes he looks a little lost. And I'm like, why have I got you on my fantasy team? And then he'll make like three tackles in like 5 minutes, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's why. So,
you know who reminds me, like gambling cornerbacks like Marcus Peters are like this as well, where it's like you're going after the big play, but sometimes you get torched because of it. So that like high risk, high reward play from Jenkins leads to some big plays for the other team too. I don't like that gamble all the time. If you're going to gamble, you have to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. You know what I mean? You have to be Derwin James. You have to be these guys that can make up a little bit of ground if you can. And guys like that, like Marcus Peters had a ton of picks in his careers. He also got torched a lot and gave up a ton of touchdowns in his career because he was playing the gambler. So
yeah,
I think Jenkins has a little bit too much of that in him.
I hear you. My guy here is Quan Martin. And I was really interested to see how the Commanders' safety room would kind of play out. I was expecting big or maybe at least better things from Chin this year, based on how they were talking him up in the build up to the season, and just his natural sort of fit with that Commanders defense. Curl gone. A bunch of other guys behind him that were kind of improving. I've never been a massive supporter, if you like, of Chin. I've not really rostered him in a lot of leagues. I loved his first season. Obviously, dropped off massively, and everyone got burnt really badly. And I was one of those as well. I didn't invest a massive amount in him though. But so yeah, Quan Martin. There's worse players to have at DB. Like you said, it's hard to choose sometimes. I'm looking around, seeing these 100% guys who are doing okay. But yeah, for fantasy purposes, I'm not too keen. He spends so much of his time lined up really deep, which isn't always a value killer, which I think we need to be careful about sometimes. We've seen like some exceptions to this rule, right, Scott? The Jesse Bates, the Minkah Fitzpatricks.
It is more often than not, though.
Yeah,
I'll say that. Like, you have to be a special type of talent to have a bunch of IDP points and play that deep free safety position.
You've got it. It makes us wary, right?
Yes.
So yeah, this week, I was talking about earlier on about how the Commanders have got the Browns, right? And the Browns have been a terrible matchup for opposition safeties in terms of tackle volume. So yeah, that scares me a little bit with Martin this week. Watson's allowed. I will say Watson's allowed some big plays to safeties. We saw that last week, right? But I don't want to bank on those big plays. I'm following the tackles. I'm following the boring tackle volume rather than those big plays, because I always assume big plays will happen anyway at some point. And I can't predict when they're going to happen. It's too difficult.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on Quan. It's and if Washington's holding the ball a lot, again, they're not going to be on defense. I don't know if that's going to be a continuous story specifically in this game, right? Maybe because Deshaun Watson holds the ball so long, maybe he'll put it up for grabs occasionally deep. That could lead to Quan Martin having a decent game. But like you said, it playing that deep safety and not having a high tackle floor just puts you off of most people's radars. So I'm with you on Quan Martin.
Yeah. And I will say, like, and I'm jumping back a little bit here to talking about, I guess, like the Dorance Armstrong one. If they get Jack Conklin back, that's an upgrade, right? So maybe they can start to, and obviously Nick Chubb as well. Some of these other players on offense can help that defense by controlling the clock a little more, keeping the wheels turning on offense. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Now, Scott, we've got I don't know if you saw, but we've got the poll on Twitter, which we ask our audience to vote on every week. And I knew who the winner was going to be this week because there's like videos of him plastered all over Twitter, or X if you prefer, where he was just sideline to sideline making big plays. And hey, he's a Cowboy, right? So people love these guys. So what do you make of DeMarvion Overshown?
Well, I'm a Texas fan as well. So I was born in Texas. My dad's whole family's from Pittsburgh. So that's why I have these weird geographical allegiances in the U.S. Places not close to each other here. But yeah, so I watched Overshown a lot at Texas. And the thing with him is, and again, just going back to my experience and watching a lot of Steelers, a guy that reminded me so much of Ryan Shazier, because he is unbelievably fast at his position, like fast enough probably to play corner, which is insane at his size, right? Big enough to decleat massive running backs and work through offensive linemen. So his physical gifts have always been great. He has been a guy that whiffs on tackles at Texas. Not happening as much this season. And with Micah Parsons being out too, I wouldn't be surprised to see him them line him up on the line a little bit more, kind of in that Micah Parsons role, to use his speed out there a little bit this week against Pittsburgh. And, you know, you're going to want to keep Justin Fields in the pocket and not let him roam and, you know, make those big plays downfield. You want to keep him contained. So we might spy a lot of Justin Fields this week as well. But yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing is his instincts have gotten so much better after sitting for a year. You know, he had the injury in the preseason last year. He rode the pine, but he was in the meetings. He was learning from some really good linebackers. And I think he has taken everything that he learned, and he has not lost a step that I have seen from this knee injury as well, which is huge, because sometimes guys are never the same after those massive surgeries. And Overshown seems like the exact same guy he was coming in, you know, but with more discipline, which is so good to see, because this could be a big get for the Cowboys. If he is going to remain as disciplined as he has this season and not whiff on some massive tackles like he did at Texas, then the sky is the limit for this dude, because he is a freak of nature athletically.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. He looks the part, doesn't he? Right, and I know he's not the finished article. No one's going to be at this point in their career development. That's really unfair to place that on him. But he looks the part. He's so rangy. I was watching some tape of the Cowboys game earlier, and it's unfair. 3rd round pick as well. It's crazy. But yeah, he's trending in the right direction. His snap share, his production, they're all going up. Damone Clark is kind of dropping off. He's now almost never making it onto the field now. Kendricks obviously limits Overshown's short-term value. I don't know whether they'd allow Overshown to play more than Kendrick, because Kendrick still seems like that guy for them to me. Yeah. But what better player for him to learn from? If we're talking, I know this is a week 5 preview, but looking ahead, because we all kind of play in dynasty leagues as well, right? And even towards the end of the season, what better linebacker to learn? Well, there are better, but you know, there's very few better linebackers for Overshown to sit behind and learn from than someone like Kendricks. He's not the same player he was, Kendricks, and he is getting a little bit long in the tooth now, but he can still impart that knowledge that people like Overshown need to pick up on, because you know, you're not going to get that from Damone Clark. And as good as I thought Bell played last year, he clearly wasn't the answer for them at that position as well, right? So yeah, Kendricks is that veteran leadership. It's a bit cliche, but it matters.
I just want to bring up too, last season, LVE in that locker room with him, Leighton Vander Esch, one of the better ones to do it in Cowboys history, right? Yep. In that locker room with him, probably going over X's and O's, telling him where to be. And I think he's picking that up and really using it. So yeah, I'm Overshown stan, and because he went to Texas. But I'm very, very impressed with how he looks in his opportunities so far this season.
86% snap share. That's getting right up there with the point. Again, like week 5, bye weeks, maybe you can start a guy like that this week in those leagues where you need to start like 3 linebackers, right?
Yeah,
there's only so many guys out there that are full-time guys, and weeks like these, you might be struggling to find one. So yeah, and Overshown is a tempting play, especially because he jumped up nearly 10%, was it, in snap share from the week before. Hopefully that continues. This is not always the case.
58, 31, 78, 86. So 59 snaps last week. And, you know, that's only Eric Kendricks had 68. So almost on the field every snap with Kendricks is a great spot to be in for a young linebacker with a lot of talent.
For sure. Okay, Scott, that, my friend, is a wrap for the week 5 IDP preview episode of the IDP After Show. I know your schedule is, we were chatting before the show in our DMs. I know your schedule is crazy busy, so thanks for joining me and dropping some of your good IDP knowledge on all of us. Been fun, right?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, you can just find my stuff at Bogman Sports on Twitter. I tweet all my stuff. I'm on Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros in this league, CFP Winning Edge. So yeah, I got a lot of shows that I'm doing. If you listen to all my stuff, you will probably be tired of me at the end of the week, to be honest. So thank you so much for having me, Jase, and love doing these shows.
I've enjoyed every minute. Everyone, please go and check out Scott's stuff if you aren't already following along, and shame on you if you're not. But yeah, all right. That just leaves me to say thank you to our listeners and viewers, whether you are tuning in on Spotify or Apple or watching us on YouTube. We appreciate you. Thank you. Please subscribe to our channels to make sure you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. This, to remind you, is our guest interview feed where you can hear from the brightest voices in IDP every week. But bye for now.
This was the IDP After Show.